the latest news of what has happened in considering, Abraham Lincoln, uh, you know, aircraft carrier. It was a drone over the Abraham Lincoln was shot down by F-35. They say that it was somehow directly moving toward the Abraham Lincoln. And we see Iran saying that we're going to do the same if we see the American drones. And then they send a new drone to go there and to monitor everything. When you bring a lot of assets, a lot of equipment, and a lot of weapons in the region, the government should have. They want to monitor each other to see what's going on, to see. And here comes the dangerous moment that any miscalculation could bring a catastrophe. What is your understanding of the current situation between the United States and Iran, considering the United States coming to the region with a lot of weapons, being prepared? Iran, on the other hand, is totally prepared from what I've seen, what I've heard, for anything, for any disastrous, attack. What is your take on that?
Well, let me take your first comments first. I was involved with, I think I've said this to you before, President Ahmadinejad, when he was in New York for the UN General Assembly meetings, in a private meeting with Frank Wisner, Tom Pickering, and some other diplomats besides myself. And my writ at that meeting, and I had 5 minutes, as did Frank and Tom and others, to present our position for Ahmadinejad to consider. My writ was an incidents at sea agreement, and one like we had with the Soviet Union for quite a number of years. An incidents at sea agreement is a signed document between the two parties, or however many parties, and it says this is what we'll do if a drone flies over one of our aircraft carriers. You know what I'm saying? Whatever happens, these are the channels I will immediately investigate and talk to and alert. These are your channels for the same thing. And that way we diffuse anything like this that might turn into a shooting situation. We were not able to achieve a significant ink sea agreement with the Iranians, but we did come to a very, I think, sound understanding that we would not start a war. We would consult our different authorities. We would question and use the radio and communication mechanisms and such. And it depended on whether it was the IRGC at sea or it was the National Navy at sea. And we had different channels. Okay, all to say that drones, depending on what type they are, now if this was a huge Predator type or Reaper type drone, be a different affair. But if it is a small drone, they are recognized reconnaissance mechanisms for militaries across the face of the earth now. Ukraine has made them almost ubiquitous in a sense because so many people are making them. So this is like a flag coming out and saying, what are you doing here and why are you here? And I'm taking a look at you. Maybe I'm photographing you, but I'm not armed. I'm not here to shoot at you. And I don't know what kind of drone it was, but I doubt very seriously that there was a drone significant to shoot at Abraham Lincoln in a threatening way. Nonetheless, they took their precautions per their precautions. They did what they had to do, I guess. That's because we don't have an agreement. That's a dangerous situation. It's a very dangerous situation, as you just extrapolated in terms of what comes next and then what comes against that and what comes against that. So this is something that needs to be understood by both sides, particularly if they're not under specific execute orders. And I read the situation right now that they are not under specific execute orders. The only order they have, as I understand it, is to display force. And then the president will decide and issue any kind of executive order, to execute a military operation or to go home or somewhere in between. So this is a very dangerous situation, as you just hinted at. And you have to have cool heads on both sides. And I hope that there are cool heads on both sides. Now, let me go to the bigger issue. I think that we are at a point now where negotiations, talks, despite the Iranian distrust, understandable distrust of us, and despite Foreign Minister Sarachi saying that trust is the most important thing of any kind of negotiation, and he's right, and we don't have it. We simply don't have it. Look at what you did before. We trusted you then, and look at what you did. Now, why should we trust you? I still think there are meaningful talks going on, and I think he hinted at that too. So this array of force is Trump's idea of making the point that if you don't adhere to these talks, and if you don't come around to what I want in some way, I might order them to shoot. Now, I'll follow up with this. I don't think there's any chance in the world, other than an accident, which you just hinted at, that he's going to order them to shoot. I really don't. I think this is all Donald Trump bluffing. And he's bluffing with a very dangerous instrument in a very dangerous situation, but he is nonetheless bluffing. I don't know if Hegseth and the others in the chain of command actually know that, the Central Command commander, for example. But Trump is bluffing, and he's trying to use that bluff. And here's the real thing that just blows my mind. What he's looking for is the JCPOA. He had it, and he kicked it out. That's what he's looking for. Ultimately, that's what he's looking for. He's not going to say they have to give up their ballistic missiles. He's not even going to say probably that they have to go to zero enrichment. It's going to be a JCPOA type agreement. The Iranians are going to be willing to test him on it. And we're going to have a cessation of hostilities, if you will, at least in that immediate sense. And then the huge question becomes, and that's why I ask you, is Witkoff carrying a club with him with Donald Trump's face on it to Jerusalem to meet with Netanyahu? The big impediment's going to be Netanyahu. But I think the IDF has convinced Netanyahu it just is not the time to do this because they've told him what will happen to Israel if they do. So we have this kind of stasis right now in the main characters. We have Iran not really wanting a war, but ready for it to the hilt. We have Trump not wanting a war, but wanting some kind of agreement to come away with so he can say, oh, this is my 15th war I've stopped and I need the peace agreement, the Nobel Peace Prize now, that sort of thing. And Bibi's got to shut up because Trump is not going to be with him if anything happens in the way of a war. And Bibi's been told that if it does happen, Israel's going to be destroyed. And he will, in fact, have to go to a nuclear weapon. And even the IDF, I don't think, is in favor of that. So I may be dead wrong, but I think that's what's happening right now. And it could go to hell in a handbag in a minute with a drone, just like you said. And so I'm trigger happy to remember the incident in the Persian Gulf when Vincennes, our Aegis cruiser, shot down the Iranian airliner. Well, that's the sort of thing we're talking about. Only here, there's a whole armada off there ready to launch.
How did you find this article in Wall Street Journal? They're talking about that Donald Trump asked his advisors for options to conduct a quick and decisive attack against Iran that won't risk a long-term war in the Middle East. But it seems that his advisors have informed him that such option doesn't exist.
Bingo. It doesn't. It doesn't. It simply doesn't exist. You can't do, let's say they devolve their objectives down to snatching the Ayatollah or the president or whomever. You can't even do that in Iran with any degree of surety because it's such a different situation. And there's so much more capability within the Iranian complex to counter you. So you're looking at, in Venezuela, I'd have said your odds of succeeding in capturing Maduro the way they did were probably 60%, because I know how professional these special operators are. And I know how much preparation went into it. And I'm going to say this, Venezuela, excuse me, I know how bad the Venezuelans are. Okay. You put all that together and you say 60% chance of success. You put those things together with Iran, and what you get is about a 10% chance of success. And you get a 85, 90% chance of starting a bigger war. And that's not a risk Trump wants to take.
Yeah. Steve Witkoff today went to Israel to talk with Netanyahu to see what is the point of view on the part of Israelis. It seems that Israel is pushing for no enrichment on Iranian soil, removal of all enriched uranium that already exists here in Iran, and restrictions on the missile program of Iran. The last one is so amazing to talk about. And
it's absurd. It's like saying, okay, you're 90 million people with a long, almost impossible to defend border, and you have enemies galore, including the United States, and we want you to disarm. That's what it's saying, because they don't have the conventional military type that we have, or that other countries in the region have, the Saudis, for example. They have missiles. And that's the backbone. Ever since remember the War of the Cities? Saddam Hussein's shooting his Scuds and the Iranians shoot him. Well, that's where they learned that that was a pretty damn effective system. And then they got more and more effective at it, both domestically and from foreign support. That's their defense now. That is their equivalent of our military. I mean, sure, they have a military, they have an RGC, they have a Navy, they have a national military, and they have somewhat of an Air Force, but their main defense is their missilery. And to take that away from them is to leave them naked in a very dangerous region. It's absurd to insist on that. And Netanyahu knows that. He knows that. What Netanyahu wants is regime change, period, or chaos. He'll take either one. Kinzer had some really good remarks on that too. I didn't realize that he had made it's in his new book he was talking about, all the groups in Iran that are now very professionally and very carefully, even tediously, almost step by step, door by door, city by city, working on inside Iran having a better government, locally, intermediately, and in Tehran. And how many women are involved in this? And it kind of got spawned out of remember the uprising of the women when the woman was killed. And he said, Stephen said, he is one of the world's experts on regime change. He studied almost all of them. He said, we should be not doing it in a way to overthrow the Ayatollah or the Majlis or any other aspect of the existing Iranian government. We should be helping these people to be even better at the democratization they're trying to create inside Iran. Not overthrow the government, but to create more and meaningful democracy in Iran. Recognizing that there's already some democracy in Iran, more probably than there is in Israel. In fact, I will say emphatically, there's more democracy in Iran than there is in Israel, certainly now. So I think he's right. And he says, don't let the usual groups do it, USAID and the ones that we put in there for regime change. Let the people who do this sort of thing the best, the international organizations, for example, help them and contact them and tell them you want to help them. And they're probably not going to believe you because they think we're trying to overthrow the regime too. But just his admission, or not admission, that's not the right word, just his study of these groups and his description of them gives me some hope that what's going to happen in Iran, if it's left alone, is the Iranian people are going to modify their government slowly over time to be more and more receptive to their needs. And that's what you want.
Larry, the reality of what's going on in Iran, I think many of us who are living outside of Iran, we don't understand, because anything happening here in Iran. You see these Mossad agents, you see all these NGOs trying to, even with, these protests started with the difficulties with the case of the economy, which was caused, by the way, by the United States. And Scott Bessent said that.
That's the first
He
thing you need.
obviously said that.
Yeah.
And after that, letting the people decide what they want, they turned everything into a chaos because they don't want any sort of order. They want to destroy everything, Larry. The plan for Iran, in my opinion, seeing what has happened in Iran in the last 3 weeks here in Iran, they have the same plan for Iran as they did in Syria. They want to destroy everything. There is nothing to be left to be. They're going to do everything to make a new Syria here in Iran. And that's the problem. That's the danger, in my opinion. And the government totally understand that. They know these people are serious people. And I talk with some of them. They're complicated people. They're so intelligent. They know what's going on. They know the differences. They recognize this sort of uncertainty on the part of the people considering the economy. They differentiate what's going on in terms of riots and protests. They know that. But after all, Iran is different, Larry. You cannot imagine anything of that sort would happen in Iran. I assume anything happening, they try to manipulate as much as they can here in Iran. They don't let the people to achieve what they want to achieve, to put pressure on the government. These policies, considering the economy, they're not correct. You have to go in that direction instead of this direction. But that's not going to happen. I would say that. Pezeshkian tried to do everything when these protesters came out, and he was talking with them, negotiating with them, trying to address the issue with the economy. But they don't want this. They want to destroy Iran from within. They're trying to destroy from within, manipulate the society, attack from outside. This is the plan on their part.
You don't have to convince me. I know what the motivations are. I was inside the government, inside the military for over 40 years. I know what the motivations are for America. Basically, the motivation in the military was to reverse the coup, reverse the coup that the Ayatollah pulled off. That was the major motivation. Still the motivation for people like John Bolton and others. They just don't like being bested, and they feel like the Iranians bested us. And so they want to reverse that. And they don't care what kind of destruction they do on the 90 million Iranian people who had nothing to do with that whatsoever. They just want vengeance. And Bibi is just bent on domination. As the foreign minister of Oman said, I'll repeat this again, the big problem in the region is Israel. Israel, not Saudi Arabia, not Iran, not Egypt. The big problem is Israel. That's who keeps everything from settling down, because what Israel wants is for all of it to be in chaos so that it can take it all. That's what it wants. And they extend the dream all the way over to Somaliland in Africa. That's what Israel wants. So you don't have to convince me of that. The Iranians are the best instrument themselves to bring a better life to themselves within their own country and bring about a better governance process too. And they could do it a lot faster and a lot more smoothly if we lifted both primary and secondary sanctions, and we bent the Europeans' arms to lift their sanctions. Iran would be a flourishing country. That's the last thing Bibi Netanyahu wants. Lebanon. He's scared to death for years of Lebanon, because Lebanon used to be the jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean. Beirut was the city everyone wanted to go to out of Europe, out of the North American complex, and so forth. Now, look at Beirut. That's Bibi's fault. That's Israel's fault. They have destroyed Lebanon. And they've done it again and again and again. Every time Lebanon threatened to come back economically and financially, they bombed the hell out of it. And now they virtually own it. That's Bibi's objective. That's Israel's objective. I don't have to keep saying Bibi. That's Israel's objective. And they want to do that to Iran. I think we're at an impasse now where Miriam's money and all the rest of the Jewish money has not necessarily succeeded in convincing Donald Trump that he wants to go this final step for Bibi. I hope I'm right. I don't think there's going to be any war. Unless there's an accident, like you were saying, unless somebody starts shooting and all of a sudden it's impossible to stop the shooting. Because you got to believe, I've got to believe as a military professional that everyone's on a hair trigger alert right now. I mean, a hair trigger alert.